Hi, everyone. This is Kay Halisak at Ohio State University. Welcome to our first week of office hours for Composing for Public Audiences. I'm joined today by my colleague, Ben McCorkle. Ben, could you go ahead and introduce yourself quickly?
That's me. Hello, everyone. If you're joining us now or if you're going to see us later, I want to welcome you all to the course. Looking forward to an exciting experience.
And with us as well, kind of behind the scenes, but over there in the group chat in your Google Hangouts pane is Rebecca Hudgens. Rebecca is a graduate student in our program here at Ohio State in Rhetoric, Composition, and Literacy Studies. Rebecca, welcome to you too. So you'll see there Rebecca posting every once in a while. If you are interested in posting a question that you might have about the Get Started module or Module 1 for Composing for Public Audiences, please use that space to do that. We will run this kind of like a radio call-in show if you're familiar with that technology, which was very common and still is in the United States, where you have MCs like Ben and me, folks who are here to answer questions and have conversations. You just post your question to the chat pane there. We will read it and keep track of that and then answer that particular question. This really is a good model, I think, for engaging us if you feel like you would like to, because the questions that you have about navigating the course, about the content for the course, about what we're asking you to do are probably questions that others have as well. So sharing them here gives us the opportunity to answer sort of collectively to everyone a question that might be of interest to them.
Right. And one thing I'll add is that in addition to the chat pane we're using when we do live office hours, there are other avenues to ask questions too if you're not available. For example, we have the composingmooc@gmail.com email address, as well as discussion forum threads where you can post questions, and we monitor those and try to address them in these office hours.
So if you do look at those, thanks Ben for mentioning the discussion forums. If you are in the course right now in Composing for Public Audiences, you'll see that we have several general sort of topics related to some of the discussions, general questions, tech support questions, and as well as ones that are related to the specific modules. So please do make yourselves familiar with those and use them as you think is going to be helpful for you. The recording for this office hour will be available and stable for you, and it'll be posted in an announcement that'll be coming out after our session is over and in the first module. So you'll be able to access it there in case there's something that you wanted to look back at or refresh your memory about. Okay.
So Kay, what are we going to talk about this first office hour segment?
Well, we're going to talk really about two things, Ben. We're going to be talking first about the Get Started module and then Module 1, Writer with a Cause. So we have a lot that we can cover today and a lot of answers or questions that we might be able to answer. Like you, I'd like to welcome everybody. We have, I think, over 300 participants who signed up for the course. And already we have a couple dozen of you who are active in the discussion forums. Thanks for already stepping into those and engaging. Really, this course is going to function, and Ben, I know you would agree with this, as you all collaborate with one another to really engage one another as well as us. You'll see a lot like the metaphor of exchange and of us encouraging you to exchange ideas and exchange your writing with one another in addition to us. And that's really, really critical to the success of this course.
Yeah, that's a feature of MOOCs in general, this kind of open, collaborative learning environment. And it's particularly part of the philosophy of this particular course. It's called Composing for Public Audiences. And to some extent, we are ourselves a public. And so I think it makes sense that we would want to share our work as it's developing and even after it's finished. So I'm encouraged to already see the activity going on where people are introducing themselves. They're from all over the world, lots of different backgrounds. And I think that that profile really strengthens the course experience.
Well, you're right, Ben. I mean, we already have folks with us who are human resources professionals, teachers, students, communication specialists, editors, consultants, translators. And already I've just noted folks from the United States, the Dominican Republic, Denmark and Turkey, New Zealand and Germany, Brazil, Pakistan, and the Philippines. And those are just some where folks have identified where they're from. And I think about every time we do the MOOC, I think about the reach, and it really is just astounding and really humbling to me too. The idea that folks from around the world are interested enough in thinking about and practicing their writing is just remarkable to me. As a writing teacher, I love the idea that folks will come together to learn more about writing.
Yeah. Think about the value of this resource as a writer. You know, you suddenly have a collection of several hundred people from all over the world, and that's a rare opportunity. Usually, in traditional classroom settings, you have about a couple of dozen people who, by and large, depending on the institution, share similar backgrounds. So this is what you call a value add, I would say.
Yeah, it is, and I think about that too. And one of the things that both the first module that focuses on world Englishes and getting started, and the introductory sort of discussion forums and posts, as well as that first module on who I am as a writer with a cause, gives us the opportunity to think about all of the different ways that we already write. Even as I was sort of constructing my own introductory post for that first discussion forum, I stopped and thought about all the different writing I do. And as I reflected on everyone else's posts, here's what I mean. Here again, what I saw. Folks already report we are all writing, and we're all writers to some extent. And folks said, that they participate and have done business writing. Some folks have even published their writing. They write short stories and novels and poems. They write slogans. They develop and post web content. They write letters and evaluations, summaries, lesson plans, newsletters, policies. I mean, you think about all of the writing that we do. And in most respects, that writing is already public.
Right.
That is, it's intended for a particular audience or set of audiences. And that's really, as we move into that module 1, as some of you already are, you begin to think about who are my audiences and what is the ethos, what's the sort of persona that I want to project through the writing that I do. And even in our discussion forums, there are opportunities to practice those skills and think about those orientations toward your writing.
Yeah, that for me, that's the always satisfying and frustrating part about writing is that it's never a one-size-fits-all kind of set of skills. You have to constantly think about these questions you were just talking about, ethos. You need to think about your audience. You need to think about genre. And even people who are comfortable writing in certain settings, sometimes when they're presented with new writing occasions, find that there are questions to be answered and tricks to figure out, and hopefully that's something you'll get out of this course is a greater awareness of all those rhetorical considerations that go on behind the scenes when you produce a piece of writing.
Well, I appreciate your mentioning that, Ben, because I think about some of the questions that students in our classes here at Ohio State might ask us. And I think both about first-year students who might be 18 or 19, traditionally aged students, as well as even graduate students. It's to think flexibly about the different kinds of writing we do and to recognize that there's not a single formula that will leverage successful writing in every different context. But we can identify and really focus on these elements that help make pieces of writing successful.
Right.
Like that matter of considering who your audiences are and then shaping the text in a way that is responsive to that particular audience. And then thinking also about how you might be perceived as a writer through the text that you're producing. and thinking about your own expertise and the values, like you said, the value added that you bring to a particular question. As I said in my post, most of the writing that I do is academic writing. It's a very comfortable kind of writing for me because I've been doing it for a long time. But I also find when I step out into other contexts for writing, like writing for a cause in a public sphere, I find myself challenged, and I really have to step back to the elements that we've put into the first module. I have to step back to those to help me shape those texts. I don't know, but do you find that for yourself as well?
Yeah. I mean, writing conceptually there's a lot of recursion, a lot of revisiting. So I would absolutely agree with that.
So, and when you think about yourself as a writer with a cause, Ben, what kinds of causes come to mind for you?
Well, I think professionally, one cause that comes to mind is I write to address the question of how do you teach students whatever subject matter more effectively. So some of my professional writing, journal articles and whatnot, tends to address that question. How can we more effectively reach students, more effectively teach them challenging concepts? But then beyond that, even I think of other kind of examples I've encountered recently that I've interested in. A disciplinary project where a bunch of people at the university from dance and from computer design and from the humanities and all across the university are coming together to address the question of how can technology be made better and more humane for future generations. I've done some writing associated with that, and some of that has been unconventional writing, so not just text, but kind of multimodal stuff that basically asks, like, when we look in the future, and we have these things that right now are smartphones, tablets, what will the next generation of those technologies look like? And how can we be mindful of how it is that we use them and that we develop applications for them? And we basically kind of, the hope is create an ecosystem that's more welcoming for humans. I think about this in a very specific way because I get carpal tunnel syndrome when I type too much because I have bad posture. But that's something I'm thinking of. And another example, this has nothing to do with me, but I was just at a conference of design educators, of all things, in Indianapolis. And a woman there was presenting on a project that involved designers, student designers, kind of developing a project that addressed a social issue. And they started off thinking really big. They started off thinking about this idea of how can we cure obesity, or how can we fix obesity? And at that point, the instructor was saying, you need to make this more local. You need to make it more audience aware. And so they drilled down, how can we fix or address obesity issues in children? Still too big, so they drilled down further. This was in Chicago. So eventually they got down to a more manageable design problem where they can implement a solution, which was, how can we encourage students in a particular neighborhood in Chicago to choose more healthy eating options? And from there, they developed a PR campaign, posters, web-based design artifacts, and a whole host of things, that digital signage that were implemented in that particular school that encouraged students to, maybe not get that slice of pizza and get a salad or a piece of fruit instead. And that stuck with me, totally unrelated to this MOOC, but it kind of stuck with me as a great example of the kind of social awareness we're trying to advocate for.
that is such a great example of that challenge. I think that we often face as writers, especially when we're really committed to writing about a cause and really wanting to have an impact on something like child obesity or childhood obesity. And what you've just described is that process of narrowing down that huge topic. And I'm thinking about some of the topics folks have already shared in the discussion forums, like really engaging like mental health, right? And the challenges we face globally around issues of mental health. And another was sexuality. And in some of those posts, we could already see the narrowing, like in one of the posts on sort of sexuality was like, well, thinking about it in terms of a particular national culture. But even there, it's like, well, the example you've given says, well, how can we even focus what our sort of intervention, what our rhetorical, our discursive, and our even sometimes action intervention might be. And I think about, an effort that an issue right now in the U.S. that I'm very much engaged in, and that is the opioid crisis in the U.S. And that opioid crisis this is very, very personally close to me, because that opioid crisis is really centrally located. Some of the worst places in the U.S. for opioid addiction and deaths is in southern Ohio and northeastern Kentucky. Yeah. And that's where my family is. And so it has such an immense impact on the lives, not only of the people who are addicted, but their families and their extended families. And that is something I've worked to intervene in, I think, personally. And one of the ways I've done that is not necessarily directly to write about the opioid crisis itself, but like in the blog post that I wrote about in my introduction, it's to work to elevate some of the elements of Appalachian culture that I think are really positive contributions, and to reflect on what Appalachian culture has provided to me personally as a way of intervening. And I mean, that's just one example, but that example that you gave about childhood obesity is great. And what the speaker mentioned about what those students and the people involved were able to do and the different kinds of interventions they created through those different kinds of documents. That's a great example. It also demonstrates the sort of the multimodal nature of what we're asking folks to think about doing as they work through composing for public audiences, is to leverage the visual and the multimodal, but also to recognize that we don't only have to work through letters to the editor or through academic discourse, or even some of the kinds of writings that you all have already suggested, but there are multiple ways of thinking about that. That's a really great example.
And sometimes those maybe unconventional or underutilized kind of genres or types of writing can be more rhetorically impactful because of their novelty.
Right, and especially for particular audiences, right?
Yeah.
Who might sort of gravitate towards certain kinds of engagements as opposed to others.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So I think, we've started to talk already about module 1, right? The writers with a cause, right? And as part of that module, we're asking you to create a literacy narrative. And Ben, I think we can come back. I'd like to come back to that in just a second. But first, I'd like to kind of skip back to the Getting Started module as well. Again, numbers of you, we know that you've read this. That Getting Started module is an opportunity for you to both orient yourself to the course and to the canvas.net. If you do find that you're having any challenges navigating the course or navigating Canvas, please do use the discussion forums or our Gmail account, and that's composingmooc@gmail.com. That's all one word, composingmooc@gmail.com. We will be checking that email account in case you do have individual questions that you'd like to raise for us. We also just want to note a little bit that to remind you all that while this course does have due dates, sort of recommended due dates that we'd like you to meet if you want to engage fully in peer review and sharing your work with others, that you can work through the course at your own pace. You aren't required to complete module 1 before you move on to module 3 and 4 and so on. So you may just want to step into the module on seeing rhetorically if you're really interested in sort of multimodal composing. We'd love for you to engage the entire course, but know that you can step in as you would like, and as your time allows. There's no obligation to complete everything or to post to every discussion forum. We really would like to encourage you to respond to one another, though, even though a discussion post prompt might say, please just post your introduce yourself. Step back into those discussion boards and engage in conversation with one another as you'd like, because that kind of exchange is going to be really helpful, both in getting started and then continuing through the rest of the course.
The flexibility of the MOOC platform is a more positive spin of what is a common anxiety dream that I have, which is I enrolled in a class and I just stopped going and forgot about it. And then it suddenly occurs to me by the time that the finals are due that I haven't gone. And then I wake up in a sweat and there we are.
And we do all still have those anxiety dreams. I think they stick with us. And, you know, and one of the other things you'll see in that Getting Started module is this focus on world Englishes. And I just want to give a little bit of background there. When we first offered an earlier version of this MOOC in 2013, 2012-13, we saw how global the audience for our class was. And then we recognized that because of the global nature of the participants, right, and the scope that we were and perspectives that they were going to bring, we recognized that we needed to sort of articulate what our philosophy was around world Englishes and about English in particular. Because one of the things that we know this course is not, this is not a grammar course. This is not a course where we're going to be focusing on what many would describe as correctness. We're not really going to provide grammar lessons or focus on style or grammar or mechanics in any kind of specific ways, implicitly or explicitly. So we won't be correcting things. And we really strongly encourage you all to be very, well, I don't know what word to use here, Ben, very sort of open about your
generous
with one another.
I mean, ideally, and this is how I talk about it in my traditional writing classes, I mean, we're all working forward in that mission to make all of our work better, you know. And if we think of it as a reciprocal relationship, that the feedback you give, this is a skill that you develop over time. That is something that you gain from this experience, is learning how to give good feedback and to become a better reader of other people's text. That's almost as important or arguably more important than becoming a good producer of text.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's true, as you point out, with our classes here at Ohio State, that actually responding to others' writing is as powerful a tool for learning as receiving the responses. And that's actually what past participants in the MOOC have told us, that it's that act of responding and of seeing other people's work and seeing the different ways other writers engage the particular questions at hand and how they learn to develop arguments or write for public audiences is itself as much a value as the actual engagement that you get in the feedback on the writing.
Absolutely.
And that, I mean, that's true for me as a writer as well, as I see how other people engage the questions surrounding, as the example I gave, the opioid crisis and how they frame their arguments. It helps me not only think about my own writing, but then how I want to step into that conversation and engage the questions, and maybe even question the assumptions that other people might have about Appalachia, because there are a lot of assumptions about that particular part of the U.S. As a culture that's not as, say, advanced as other areas of the U.S. And so there are a lot of problematic assumptions that I'm always working to try to contest and work against. And that's part of that argumentative challenge that I face, right? And we all face different challenges in that respect. But so these are just some of the things that we want you all to think about as you're stepping into and working through the Getting Started module and introducing yourselves, and then moving into that first module. And then Ben, if you could you talk a little bit about how we see the digital archives of literacy narratives working as a resource for folks?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to try to share my screen while I'm doing this. Just so bear with me a second. I'll share my entire screen. Okay. So if you're not familiar with this, and first of all, let me back up and say, like, for all of the major assignments in this MOOC, we've created what we call level up opportunities, which is just an opportunity to dive a little deeper into the subject matter, or basically have an extended experience around that assignment. In this first module, we give you the opportunity to put your work out in the public through or by submitting to the DALN, or the Digital Archive of Literacy Narratives. And if you don't know what that is, the DALN started in 2007. It's an open collection of people's stories about learning to read or write, or learn some other specialized skill that kind of encompasses what we understand as literacy stories, or as literacy. And so if you go here and you start poking around, use the search bar and whatever, you can find lots of different kind of accounts of people in academia, or people who do factory work, or people who have been lifelong video game players, or coders. It's really all over the place. Musicians, cooks, ... And for this particular assignment, we encourage you to share your work publicly on this archive. You're not required to. We're not compelling you to. But it is a worthwhile opportunity to get yet another personal account out there in the public, which is a benefit for scholars, for students, for communities. One of the things I would also add about the DALN is that it's useful as a model specifically for this assignment. As Kay mentioned earlier, we have taught this class or versions of it since 2013. And we've included this level up in, I believe, all of them. Mm-hmm. For example, if you were to go, let's just search some narratives. Kay was telling me earlier that if you just use the word cause, you'll get a whole bunch of examples of who I am as a writer with a cause. So these can serve as models for you if you want to see how other people have approached this question in the past, maybe unconventional ways that they've done this. Here, Smita Kumar's description: my journey to become a writer with a cause, how I use Google groups to influence public opinion, probably gets into some technological literacy. These are different file types. Some of these are doc, like this one here is a docx file. You might find video content and other things, but useful as a resource to kind of help shape your thinking about it as well. And I'll stop there.
Sorry, I just lost my sound. It'll come back in a second, I think.
Okay.
You can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. It's back now. Okay. So thanks, Ben, for that. You know, I was really, as you just showed the view of that page on the DALN, I think at the bottom it indicated there were 6 pages of results.
Yes.
For files, so that we just saw the first of 6 potential pages of pieces that actually address exactly the narrative that we're asking you to engage. The goal here really is, for this first assignment, we hope this feels like what we in the US and higher education would call low stakes writing. That is, remember that Ben and I and the other faculty who are part of our course, Scott DeWitt, who's one of our colleagues here at Ohio State, and Melissa Cherry, who's our reference librarian from Miami of Ohio, Miami University of Ohio, and Rebecca, that we won't be stepping in and evaluating your pieces of writing. Our goal is to encourage that writing and to respond to it in ways that we think will be productive for you as writers. But we're not going to be grading or evaluating that, nor do we ask you all to grade or evaluate one another, but to respond in the spirit of exchange and collaboration. So please use this narrative as an opportunity to introduce yourself and to begin to tell stories about yourself as a writer and how, as a writer, you have engaged a particular cause or series of causes or related causes. The idea here is just to get those initial ideas down on paper and to think about writing stories. So for those of you who have published stories and novels and write poems, and those of you who've already sort of exercised your skills as creative writers, as opposed to, say, academic or business writers, this may feel very comfortable to you. For those of you who don't often exercise those same muscles of telling stories and writing narratives, this is a great opportunity to step back into that and try your hand at it. And again, stepping into the DALN to look at some of those examples is a great opportunity.
Yeah. One of the things, Kate, I've been thinking about as you were talking is this, it goes back to the question of how we zero in on a cause and how we think about addressing it and how we kind of work to winnow down. The level of story, you know, the level of like personal narrative is sometimes a lot more impactful than the big kind of overblown kind of you know, the kind of global level problems that we try to solve. And sometimes we reach for those instinctually, but when we tell stories or when we implement solutions like, you know, a series of posters for a particular school to address childhood obesity at that location, these things scale up. They're implementable, you know, at larger scale. So in some ways, when we get local, we're potentially having a larger impact on that global problem that we otherwise wouldn't begin to know how to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the other thing writing locally allows for, I think, is it allows for us to sort of to voice our own engagement and to give voice to our own perspectives on the particular topic or issue in ways that would be much more difficult for me just personally, right, to that larger question for me for the opioid crisis. I can't imagine how I might enter a national conversation about that with my narrative, but I can really see ways that I can speak to that at the local level in my little county, in my little town, in northeastern Kentucky. And so that's the route that I took with the blog post that's part of my introduction that was how I entered that. And then I shared that on social media, right? So it was a blog post and then it was shared over Facebook and through the Flatwoods City Facebook page, and it probably reached, I joke that that piece has probably reached more readers and viewers than any piece of academic writing I've ever done, because I was able to, and others, right, by liking it and posting it on their Facebook pages, it was seen by hundreds more people than I think it would have been had I published it, say, in a local newspaper, where maybe the readership would have been much smaller.
Right.
So yeah, so think about all of those things. Think about how you want to frame yourselves as writers and as writers with causes. And remember to be generous with yourselves as well. I think it's always helpful to think about what we can improve with our writing, but I want to encourage you also to think about what you already do really well as writers and what your strengths are as writers, because if we value what our strengths are at the same time we're attending to the things that we can improve, I think that lends itself to improving our writing as well, to be humble, but also to acknowledge what you do well and where your skills and interests are.
Sounds great.
Great. So I think we have, I keep sort of glancing over and looking at the chat box, and we do not yet have any questions. Ben, I'm wondering if there might be just a couple of more things that we could do here, and I am going to maybe pass it over to you for a second if you have anything, any comments you want to make while I try to share my screen here in just a minute. Okay. If there's anything, okay.
Yeah, I get. Well, one thing I was interested in is maybe asking Rebecca if there's anything she thinks we need to cover. The thing about running a MOOC is that there are a lot of moving parts, and as we work through the process, with a team of faculty and graduate assistants and instructional designers and all of that, there's a lot of things to kind of stay on top of. Rebecca's got probably a higher altitude view than many of us do. So if there's anything you think we should add, by all means. But
I think, am I now presenting to everyone?
I think so.
So you can see my screen? That was very easy. Yes?
No, I still see your face.
It says I'm presenting to everyone.
Yeah, I saw that too. But
my screen's not up. Oh, Rebecca's coming down. Rebecca was just down the hall, so now she's coming to help me out. So do I not?
Yeah, we're not.
You are presenting to everyone.
The screen share button's over there.
Oh, this one?
I think, yes.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. It's a good thing Rebecca was just down the hall. There we go.
There we go.
Oh.
You broke the internet.
Ben, do you now see just our course screen? Okay, excellent. So what I wanted to do is just sort of kind of as a final sort of maybe helpful reminder is just to show you how to navigate. I'm going to have to change this slightly to student view so you can see what you all will see. So this is what your page in Canvas should look like. And you'll see you have this left-hand nav bar where you can access announcements, the different modules for the course. If you want to go directly to the assignment lists, you can see those. And then our discussion boards. So if you wanted to just step in quickly to see if there have been any updates on the discussion boards, you can just click here and it will take you to the list of our discussions, right? And so you can see here, and this indicates that there are, oh, look at that, 8 responses, and 8 of which I need to now look at, and I haven't yet. So you can see, and this will tell you how many responses are there and how many you haven't yet read, if you want to step into those. We will be posting announcements, and you should see these. There are several that have already come out, and that's where you'll also be able to access the video of this live stream. And then finally, probably one of the most important is then the different modules for the course. These are all structured the same way. And you can see this one isn't activated for me because I haven't yet completed the Get Start module. So this is mimicking me as a student who actually hasn't stepped into the course yet. So if you are, for some reason, having trouble accessing later modules in the course, it is because you haven't yet completed the required elements for the Get Started module. We've created it this way so that we make sure that you've had an opportunity to look at the overview and become familiar with the course, that you've activated this Canvas user orientation so that you're familiar with how Canvas functions. We have a welcome survey that we'd like you to complete, a consent to participate in research, and it's important to note that you do not have to consent to participate in research, but you do need to indicate whether you do or do not consent. And then finally, there's a research survey and that level up challenge. Again, as Ben noted earlier, you do not have to complete the level up challenge, but it is something that's there and available for you.
Right.
Okay. So that is, I think, all that we have maybe for our introductory office hours today. We will have office hours each week. So next week, look for the announcement for our upcoming office hours for Module 2. That's it from me. Rebecca, thank you for your help today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.